In 2014, the U.S. Air Force announced it would retire every single A-10 Warthog. All 281 of them gone. The official reason: the service needed to save $35 billion and redirect that money to a newer jet. The math was clean, the logic was simple. 12 years later, the same Air Force has spent over $13 billion keeping that exact same aircraft alive. New wings, new weapons, new cockpit, extended to 2030. That is not a policy reversal. That is one of the most expensive decisions in modern aviation history, and almost nobody has explained why it happened. In the next 14 minutes, you will understand exactly where that $13 billion went, why the Air Force kept writing the checks on a jet they publicly said they wanted dead, and what it reveals about the most expensive weapons program in American history. This is not a story about an old jet. This is a story about a $400 billion mistake. In military aviation, there is one rule that has never been broken. When a jet becomes obsolete, you replace it. You do not rebuild it. You do not pour billions into a 50-year-old airframe when you have next generation fighters on order. You let it retire with dignity. You modernize, you move forward. Every Air Force in history has followed this rule. The U.S. Air Force wrote the rule, and then the U.S. Air Force broke it 6 times. Because the A-10 Warthog has been scheduled for retirement since 1984, the year they stopped building it. Every single attempt to end its service life has failed, not because the Air Force changed its mind, but because something kept getting in the way. That something is what this video is about. So here is what makes no sense. The Air Force has tried to retire the A-10 at least 6 times since 1984. Congress blocked it every single time. In April 2026, the Air Force stopped training new A-10 pilots completely. The last class graduated at Davis-Monthan Air Force Base in Arizona. At the same time, they shut down the A-10 heavy maintenance depot at Hill Air Force Base in Utah, disbanded the maintenance squadron. In November 2024, the A-10 demonstration team flew its final public performance. Every institutional signal pointed to one outcome: retirement. And then on April 20th, 2026, Air Force Secretary Troy Menck announced the A-10 is extended to 2030, after stopping pilot training, after shutting down the maintenance hub, after the final air show. $13 billion. So the question is simple. Why did the U.S. Air Force spend $13 billion on a jet it spent 40 years trying to kill? To understand why the Air Force cannot walk away from the A-10, we need to go back to 1967. The Vietnam War is at its peak. American ground troops are calling for air support, and the jets answering those calls, the F-100S and F-105S, are fast, sophisticated, and almost completely useless at the job. They are too fast to identify targets, too fragile to absorb ground fire, too dependent on long runways that don't exist in jungle terrain. So in 1967, the Pentagon issues a new requirement: not faster, not stealthier, tougher, an aircraft built specifically to fly low, take hits, and provide accurate fire support to soldiers on the ground. In 1972, Fairchild Republic wins the contract. The YA-10 makes its first flight, and the design decision made in that moment is the direct reason $13 billion was spent in 2026. The A-10 was not designed around an airframe and then given a weapon. The entire airframe was designed around one specific weapon, the GAU-8 Avenger cannon. That is a gun 19 feet long. It weighs over 4,000 pounds. It fires nearly 4,000 rounds per minute. The nose of the entire aircraft was built to carry it. The engines were moved to the rear to clear the gun's path. The cockpit was surrounded by a titanium protective shell half an inch thick to protect the pilot from ground fire. The aircraft was designed to keep flying with one engine gone, half a tail missing, and hydraulics destroyed. Survivability over speed, endurance over elegance. That single design philosophy is the reason this jet is still flying in 2026, and the reason $13 billion has been invested in keeping it there. 716 aircraft were built between 1972 and 1980. 1984 original cost $98 million per aircraft, the equivalent of roughly $188 million in today's money. What happened next explains everything. There are dozens of numbers in the A-10 upgrade story, but only 4 actually explain where the money went and why the Air Force kept writing the checks. Number 1, $11 billion 2007. Boeing receives a contract for 173 sets of brand new wings, what engineers call the enhanced wing assembly. Here is the meaning behind that number. The original A-10 wings were cracking. Decades of low-altitude, high-stress flying had fatigued the aluminum structure. Without new wings, the entire fleet would have been grounded by 2015. Permanently. This upgrade did not enhance the A-10, it saved it from being destroyed by physics before the Air Force could retire it. Number 2, $999 million 2019. Boeing receives a second contract called the ATAC program for 112 additional wing sets. These new wings are rated for 10,000 flight hours without a major structural inspection that extended the entire fleet's service life past 2030. Cost per aircraft for the new wings, approximately $11 million cost to build a new replacement aircraft, $188 million. The upgrade math was never irrational. Number 3, the A-10C upgrade package from 2005 onward. New digital cockpit, advanced targeting systems, laser-guided rockets, meaning rockets that steer themselves onto a target, precision navigation. A 1970s analog aircraft became a precision strike platform, the same airframe designed to fire a cannon could now hit targets with 1-meter accuracy. Number 4, the cost comparison that changes everything. Cost to fly one A-10 for 1 hour, approximately $17,716. Cost to fly one F-35A for 1 hour, approximately $44,000. You can fly 2.5 A-10 sorties for the cost of one F-35 sortie doing the same mission. And this final number puts everything in context. The F-35 needed a major software upgrade to become fully combat capable. That upgrade originally cost an estimated $106 billion. The revised cost as of 2025, $165 billion, still not complete. The entire A-10 upgrade program, new wings, new avionics, new weapons, costs less than the cost overrun on the F-35's software alone. That is the financial context in which the $13 billion decision was made. In 2014, the Air Force brought its most sophisticated arguments to Congress. Spreadsheets, budget projections, 5-year savings models. The case was meticulously constructed. $35 billion saved over 5 years if the A-10 was retired. The numbers were airtight, and Congress said no, not because the numbers were wrong. Because before the Air Force presented its spreadsheets, a different kind of witness took the stand. Ground combat veterans, Army sergeants, Marine officers, special operations soldiers who had called in A-10 strikes, who had watched them save lives in situations where nothing else in the sky could do the same job. When a sergeant who has been in a firefight tells a senator that the A-10 saved his life, that testimony carries a weight that no cost-benefit analysis can match. And then things took a more uncomfortable turn. In 2015, a 2-star general at Nellis Air Force Base told officers under his command that speaking positively about the A-10 to Congress was, and this is a direct quote, tantamount to treason. He was fired. In 2016, Congress mandated a direct fly-off A-10 versus F-35 doing the same close air support mission. The results were classified. They stayed classified until 2023. The $13 billion was not purely an aviation decision. It was a human decision made by people whose constituents had come home because an old jet showed up when it mattered. But here is where this entire story takes a big, unexpected turn. The $13 billion spent on the A-10 is not really about the A-10. It is about the F-35, the aircraft that was supposed to replace it. For over a decade, the Air Force made a consistent argument the F-35 Joint Strike Fighter could perform every mission the A-10 performs, and do it better, faster, stealthier, more precisely. The A-10 A-10 was a Cold War relic, the F-35 was the future. Congress was skeptical. They mandated the fly-off in 2016. The results were classified until 2023. When the results were released, they showed what ground troops had testified to for years. In the close air support role, flying low, flying slow, and flying close to friendly troops in complex terrain, the F-35 cannot replicate what the A-10 does. And then the broader F-35 program revealed its own problems. As of late 2025, the Pentagon's own testing office confirmed that no combat-ready F-35s with the newest TR-3 hardware configuration had been delivered. TR-3 is the version that was supposed to give the jet its full combat capability. Approximately 110 aircraft were confined to training and testing, only not cleared for deployment. The software upgrade that was supposed to complete the F-35 had grown from a $106 billion program to a $165 billion program, still not finished. The gap the F-35 was supposed to fill stayed open. The close air support capability the A-10 provides, available, proven, and affordable, had no replacement on a realistic timeline. The $13 billion was not an investment in the past. It was a direct consequence of a $400 billion program not yet delivering on its core promise. Why did the Air Force spend $13 billion on a 50-year-old jet? Exactly 3 reasons, and each one is more rational than the last. 1. The replacement was not ready. Combat-capable F-35s in the newest configuration had been delivered as of late 2025. 110 after remained in training. Only the close air support gap was real. Retiring the A-10 would ground troops without dedicated low-altitude air support for years with no alternative standby. The A-10 was not sentiment, it was the only option that did not create an immediate ability hole. 2. The upgrade cost less than the alternative. $1 billion in A-10 upgrades versus $44,000 per hour for F-35 sorties doing an inferior version. Mission at $17716 per flight hour for the A-10, the service would have spent more using the F-35 as a substitute than it spent on the entire upgrade program. The specialist aircraft for the specialist mission was the cheaper decision. 3. The airframe still had life remaining. Boeing wing sets are rated for 10,000 flight hours without a major structural inspection. The current A-10 fleet has significant life remaining. Air Force Secretary Troy Main in April 2026, and these are his exact words, that the extension preserves combat power as the defense industrial base works to increase combat aircraft production. The Air Force did not spend $13 billion because it loves the A-10. It spent $13 billion because the math of not spending it was worse. Why did the U.S. Air Force spend $13 billion on a 50-year-old jet? You heard that question 14 minutes ago, and it sounded like a story about stubbornness, about an old aircraft that refused to die. It was not that story. The Air Force tried to retire the A-10 more times than any aircraft in the history of American military aviation. They shut down the pilot training pipeline. They closed the maintenance depot. They stood down the demonstration team. They did everything except successfully retire it, because every time they tried, the same two facts stopped them. The aircraft they spent $400 billion building to replace, it was not ready, and the troops on the ground still needed something that could fly low, absorb punishment, and stay in the fight. $13 billion kept the only proven solution operational, while the expensive future finished being built. The A-10 was not kept alive because it is the future. It was kept alive because the future is not here yet. 103 aircraft congressional floor minimum flying until at least 2030. That is not the ending anyone planned for. The question is not whether the U.S. Air Force made the right call spending $13 billion on the A-10. The question is whether the $400 billion program that was supposed to make this decision unnecessary is paying attention.